Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing. So I know sometimes the ink is a little scary, but thanks for being willing to draw with me. I want to guarantee you something too, that the more you draw with ink, the better you're going to be at drawing overall. So we're going to start with our number 2 pencil, and we're just going to block in with the side of our pencil, block in whatever you see. So I'm going to start with this, this building here. You can just, it's kind of almost a triangle shape here. And just start there. There's a chimney that comes up. Rectangles, just, you know, anytime you're drawing buildings, they're all man-made. There's very few organic buildings out there. So squares, rectangles, triangles. Leave plenty of room for the water down here, okay? So don't get too excited about the buildings and have them overpower everything. That water is going to be fun to do. Just look at the shapes of things and draw those in. And it doesn't have to be exact, but you want to be as close as you can. If you want to throw in like where the windows go and things like that, you could do that. Just rectangles. You're just blocking it in. Once you start kind of establishing how big things are, then you can kind of look at it and go, oh, you know, it's too big or too small, or but you need that point of reference to begin with. Just squares, triangles, rectangles. Notice too that if the, like this little tower on the side is very curved, all you need to do is take your hand and just do a little arch with your wrist. So you just kind of come to the top and just do a little arch. Bottom by the water is slightly curved right there, just ever so slightly curved. When we get in perspective and we start doing perspective, we talk about cylinders and how the farther up from your eye level line they go, the rounder they get, or the more curved you get. The closer they are, the more level they are. Then if they go below, they're a little round. You can, if you want to, at the bottom, just where the reflection is, you can draw that in too, very lightly. So you can come down in, you can put in that little reflection if you want to. All that stuff can drop down in there. Otherwise, we're just going to do that with our pen. When you're doing trees and bushes and things, you can just kind of do these little kind of bumps, almost like drawing clouds. Because it's just you just want to block in where the trees go. The texture of the trees will get with the ink. Even the vines that are creeping up this side of that tower, just kind of block them in where you think they're going to go. And you can do more drawing than what we're doing if you'd like to, but we're just going to be, you know, using ink drawing here. It's So for me, that's probably plenty of information. Eventually, all this drawing that we're going to do here anyway gets erased. All of it. Because our drawing is done with ink, not with graphite. The cool thing about these Pigma Micron pens, not only are they permanent and archival, but if you get them wet, they won't bleed. They'll stay in the paper. After the ink is dry, which sometimes takes a little bit, depends on the surface of your paper, you can take your kneaded eraser, go over the top of it, get rid of all the graphite, and the ink is going to stay there. And it's still going to be black and really nice. So these are very popular pens. You can buy them just about anywhere. I like to start with the top and work my way down. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with this chimney over here. And I can see kind of a little angle. It probably has a little top to the chimney. So I'm just going to go in there on the top and just do this little shape using little dots and dashes. You can do a little double line if you want. You can break that line. But little dots and dashes. And don't press hard. This ink is going to come off on the page whether you're pressing or not. So draw very lightly, very gentle. Ink drawing is very gentle. Here's the top, and the top is very dark, but not all over, so you can just kind of put in little dots and dashes, just darken in that top a little bit. There's a little edge right here, and so I'm going to do this little tiny rectangle, and I'm going to do these little angles because it's in perspective and these lines are coming this way, but it's all made out of brick. So I'm just going to do these little angles back and forth with little dots and dashes. And I'm going to do it in a rectangle shape right here, just a long, thin rectangle. These little dots and dashes. And that's going to give me the texture of brick. I wasn't trying to draw every little brick. You just need a few. Well, this side has brick too. It's a little bit lighter than that side was because our light source is coming from this direction. You can tell that by the cast shadows, how they're cast against the building. That's the direction. And so anything that's going to be on the left side is going to be a little darker than that that's on the right side. So knowing that, I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm just going to go and just going to do little dots and dashes until it hits that edge. Rather than draw a line there, I'm just going to start from my edge and move my way in with little dots and dashes. We can always add more later on if we need to. And if you think about it, we've just created the shape of that chimney without any lines around it. Now, I know I'm going overboard a little bit. There are times when you really need some edges, some lines here and there, some defining things. But I want you to see that you can do an entire drawing without that, because your edges take care of themselves. So the whole surface down in here is going to be done that way. Over here on the tower, the brick and the rock are a little different. So we're going to attack that a little differently. So as we come down, here's the roof line. Little dots and dashes to show where that roof line goes. This edge over here is really light, so I'm going to do the same thing. I can do little dots and dashes to just show that there's brick right here, but I'm not going to draw a line down that edge. Leave that line, that edge out. And here I'm going to do the window. And the window, because our light source is coming from this direction, our window is 7s. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm just going to take a little edge there and drop that down, and a little edge here and drop that down. Now there's a light edge around the window, and so I'm just going to leave some of that out. And also there's a little shadow inside the window pane. So if I do a little double line there, and if it's in shadow and it's very dark, you can hatch through that little rectangle you just created. And usually the top is a little darker too, so I'm going to put that in there. Just a little double edge. I'm still doing little sevens, so that's still that shape. Now the edge over here, where my little rectangle starts and stops, I can come in and put a little dot there to just tell myself where that is. Little dot there. And then I'm just going to hatch through that. I can hatch this way or however you want to do it. I'm just going to hatch this way. Just hatch through it. Hatch, hatch, hatch. Try to leave that center part out. But that's your window. Piece of cake. If your window has glass on it and the glass is reflecting of the light, you probably wouldn't need hardly any hatching at all. Over on this side, there's kind of an eave that goes under the roof. So you put that in with just a very light, thin line, or a couple of light, thin lines even. And the rest of that then is going to be done with those little meandering dots and dashes. So I can go through and do this whole surface with dots and dashes. Before I do, though, I'm going to just kind of denote where some of the edges are. Like right around the window, usually there's a lighter edge. They use a different kind of stone. So I can come in and just little dots and dashes to help me remember that I don't want to go all the way to the window. I'll leave a little bit of light there. Sometimes underneath the window, they have a little window sill or a box that's underneath. They'll put flowers in the little box or whatever. And maybe I want to do these little bay windows that kind of stick out away from the building. They're just 3 little triangles. There's a dark eave underneath it. And a lighter one on this side. In order to do a little edge, you can just do some little dots or dashes. And if there's some tiles or something on the top, you can keep those going, little dots and dashes, just to keep those going a little bit. They're a little darker than the rest of it, so as you do the rest of it, you're just going to do less line. And the windows are going to be done pretty much the same way we did these windows up here. You just kind of pick out yourself a little rectangle and just do little hatched lines through it. You can even it out a little bit with some dots and dashes if you want to, if you need to. There are some window, some tracery in the windows. I think there might be a little archway in there, so I might do a little arch. One right there. A little one right there. And again, if you think, well, I need some edges, I need something to help me there, you can draw that in with your pencil if you want. Otherwise, you can just hatch through it. Just think rectangle, hatch through that rectangle. There's another little rectangle over here, hatch through that. And if it looks a little bit darker in places, you can crosshatch through it. Like some of that window's kind of dark, so I'm just going to move my hand around, go the other way. It's called cross-hatching. And part of that window on the top is darker than the rest, so I'm just going to hatch through a few little lines up there. And that'll darken in that edge up there at the top. This window on this side is catching a lot of light, so I'm just going to do a couple little edges and call it good. Maybe a dot or so here and there. So some of this beam work that's done around the windows, you can just use little lines, double lines if you want to. And they don't even have to connect. I mean, you can have them just kind of hanging out there. I'm drawing so lightly that my pen just skips across the surface. This side is in a little bit more shadow, and if you wanted to, you could go through and just say, well, I can see that shadow all the way through. Maybe I'll just throw that shadow in using some parallel line like that. Because we're going to be doing texture in there anyway. You can go through that whole surface. And then if it's a little darker here and there, you can just add a few little dots and dashes. Anything you see that is a little darker. Little supports that come underneath there, I'm just going to use little lines to kind of go through and support that. Like I say, we can always come back into it later on. I'm going to do that other window over here. So it's about level with this one. I'm going to come over here and throw that in. Some of it's covered up by these vines that are coming up there. I'll show you how to do those here too. The window's pretty much the same way we did the other windows. You just kind of look at it and go, okay, a little rectangle right there, a little rectangle below it. They're just little hatched lines. You can use dots and dashes if you want to. And later on, you're going to find a way that you like to do it, and you'll kind of get your own voice here when you start ink drawing. There's lots and lots of different ways to do this. We can always come back into it and do more if you feel like you need it. So I'm going to just do some very light line through here because there's a shadow that's across there. And I'm barely touching the paper, so you're getting this very light edge. This is a very light line. I'm just going to do these little dots and dashes to just show where the bushes are. And then I'll do those later. Here's that cast shadow. Little cross hatching if you feel like you need it. If it's darker and you think, oh, it's not as dark as I thought it was, you can go back in and darken in some areas. And now I'm going to texture this whole surface and just back and forth. Those little dots, lines. Some areas are a little darker than others, so you can concentrate on those. Right below the chimney gets a little darker right in there, so I might concentrate a little bit more line in there. I'm just barely touching the paper. I'm not even pressing it against the desk. Just barely touching it. Back and forth. There's little areas that are very light. You can pretty much leave them out. You just do a few little dots and dashes in there. Keep it fairly light. And then concentrate on the darker areas. Whether they're in the shadow or if it's part of that area that's kind of worn by the elements. Sometimes you're in a place where it rains quite a bit. There's a lot of mineral deposits that happen. It gets a little darker. Whenever you do little lines too, try to make sure that they're not all the same length. Do some long ones and short ones, and try to vary them out a little bit so it's interesting. So I'm going to do some of the vines that are growing up around here and some of this foliage. Anytime you do leaves, it's not important what kind of leaf they are. Most of the broadleaf kind of things you can do with little M's and U's. What I mean by that, and I'm going to do this fairly large here, but on the top you do these little M's like this, and you can do them in little fan shapes like this. Except this is a little smaller, so I'd use them a little smaller. Then on the bottom edges, you're going to do little U's like this. And you can have little spots just hanging out. Like there's a little limb that's kind of coming off there. You can come up here and just do little M's. And you could just have that little limb just hanging off up there. It's not even, you think, well, it's not even attached to anything. That's okay. Here's some more little dots and dashes. I'm just trying to kind of go in M shapes. And pick out the shadowy areas and do those first. And often you could just leave out the lighter areas. But if you think, oh, that's too light, just put a couple little dots and dashes in there and you got it. And don't be afraid to skip areas. If you think to yourself, oh, I'm not going to put that in there, when in doubt, leave it out. Just leave it out. You can always come back in. M's and U's. And all of a sudden, it'll look nice and leafy. It is a practice thing. I mean, you never get it right exactly the first time. Okay, and I'll continue on with that as I go down, but right now I'm going to do that little tower area. I'm going to start with the little cupola that's on the top there. There's the edge of my roof. There's some value in there, some little lines, dots, dashes, whatever it takes to make that texture. One, two, three, four. Four little supports. I'm sure there's more behind it, and then that little oval shape, which isn't really oval, it's more hexagonal. Just hatch through it. Couple little dots and dashes to show the edges. And this one edge is really light, maybe a dot or two to just show that edge, but just leave it out completely. And then I'm just going to refine it with little dots and dashes around the edges because it's kind of dark around the edges. Anything else there you think you need? Dots and dashes to darken it in. Here's the edge of my roof. I'm just going to put little dots and dashes. If this is not in the right place, you can move that. If you drew a line there, you couldn't move it. But here you can, because the roof is made out of dots and dashes. So if I think, well, I could move that over a little bit, I can move it over, and nobody will ever know. Little dots and dashes in a very linear pattern that'll make it look like tiles on the roof. Some of my favorite areas are these little supports that go up in here. If you want to, you can use your pencil and draw those in just ever so lightly. They're just little U shapes. So you could go up there and say, well, there's a U shape there. There's a U shape here. And as it gets around to the edge, those U shapes get thinner. They also follow that arch, the same arch that we had. So it can go around, it can get thinner. There's part of this is ruined, and so that little part that you see sticking out there is just ruined. We can put those in. You can also use your pencil to get in those arches, tell you where each of those little archways are, and the shadows underneath. So those are just guidelines for us. And then you just come back in and hatch through it. Hatch, 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 hatch. And some of that is in shadows, so you can, again, you could hatch through it very quickly where the shadow is. Because you're going to be drawn over the top of that anyway. Little rock and brick. The brick, all you need is this kind of meandering line. And a meandering line is where you go one way. Let's see, you go one way and then you come back and then you go another. This is meandering. And you can do that, is that style of technique there, to get kind of a brick look. And you can be a little spontaneous with it, but it's that same kind of idea. You just kind of back and forth. Dots and dashes. Back and forth. In the direction that it flows, so it's kind of an arch this way. Then I think, oh yeah, that's not quite dark enough anymore. I mean, I thought it was at first, but now it isn't. So I'm just going to hatch through it some more. Wherever you think like you need it. More line you stick in there, the darker it's going to look. There's some little shadows under some of these, and so I'm just going to throw those little shadows in with little hatched lines. Remember, you're not drawing a building, you're drawing shapes of dark and light. And the building will come through. You'll look at it and go, oh, yeah, okay, it's a building. But as you're drawing, in the back of your mind, you're thinking just shapes of dark and light. Don't overthink this. So as I come down the tower here, I'm still going to do that brick. I'm going to do it arched like this, and the closer I get down towards the eye level line, that level that's right in here, the straighter I'll get. So So just meandering lines back and forth. There's a little window over here. Maybe I'll throw that window in. A little arch there. You don't need brick everywhere, just here and there. And if you think, well, there's a little bit of texture in there, just throw a dot in there. This edge is really light. It's defined by the trees behind. So you can, again, if you want to, you've got your pencil. You can take that pencil and say, okay, that's my edge, and just start there with your line and come in. Everybody understands that that is the edge of the building. And when you get rid of your pencil line, you've got a subliminal edge there. All right, I'm gonna continue on with those little vines that are creeping up the side there, and just little M's and U's on the bottom. And where it's dark, I'm gonna leave it dark, and where it's light, you can just leave it out. I'm just looking at the shadows, trying to get those. Everything else will fall into place. Like I say, you can always come back into it later and do more if you need to. Your arch windows are the same as your square windows, except the 7 part is rounded. You just start out with the kind of a round 7 area and then just tag through it. Here's some of those meandering brick, and since it's darker over here, I'm going to put more here than I am over here. And over here, I might just put just a few little dots and dashes, but it's light over there. It's amazing what a little bit of a dot will do to create some value. Usually right next to the water's edge, your building's going to be a little darker because it gets those mineral deposits and it's wet and things. So right there towards the bottom, I'm just going to hatch through it, make it a little darker. Off to the side are some trees, and like I say, you can just have these little ends just kind of poking out there, and you can just hanging out there, not even attached to anything. But everybody gets the idea that it's limbs, branches. These are really dark, so I'm going to start out with hatched lines, and then I'll go back in and do some edges. Look how the tree, looking through the window and the top of it, have defined that wall. I didn't have to draw a line around it. Just the shapes of the shadows define that edge. We're almost to the point where we can do the water. And just because I want to get to the water, I'm going to show you how to do that. Water is very linear, okay, very horizontal. So when you're doing water, always come back and forth. When you were a little kid, you did a puddle like this. Well, that only works if you're looking straight down on it. Most water, you're looking across the surface. And so you're going to go back and forth. So what I'm going to do is just come back and forth in that meandering pattern. Only in the darkest areas. So like here where the edge of that tower is, the shadow, the dark area, comes out this way. And so I can just start there and kind of come back out, back and forth. And where I stop, right here, that denotes the edge of the building. So just back and forth, break that edge. And don't get too much. You can always come back into it and add more. Same thing over here. I can use that to denote the water back in here. And because the water is very dark, I'm going to do more edge. But it's very, very back and forth. Where the roof line is of this, you can see that. Just do these little back and forth little things. And just say, well, there's a little dark area there. There's a little dark area here. Here's a window. Another window up here. If you wanted to do some of those little lily pads, just leave them out. As you go through there, you just leave it out. And if you think, well, I want to define them a little bit more, you can do these little oval shapes, but just a few here and there. I think for the most part, if you just left them out, you'd be fine. Any kind of shadow, you're going back and forth. Is that the easiest water you've ever drawn? Water just reflects whatever's around it. So if the sky is light, the water's going to be light. You just look at it, and wherever it's dark, wherever there's some shadow, just do these little horizontal meanderings back and forth. I mean, right now you're kind of armed with everything you need to finish this drawing. We only have a little bit of time. This is just practice. And because it's just practice, we don't expect it to be perfect, but you could finish this out as far as you want it to go. And remember that it's all about enjoying your experience. It's all about learning something new, doing something you never thought you could. I have so many people that say, "Oh, I would love to draw, but I just don't have the talent." I think that there is a propensity for talent, a propensity to do something. It's because you love doing it. And if you love doing it, you're going to concentrate on it more, you're going to do it more. If there is a talent that you want, it just takes time and effort. I mean, we all have abilities. And for me, people go, "Oh, you're so talented." You don't see the amount of practice that it takes to do this. I'm still looking at things and still trying to figure things out. It doesn't come magically. There's no magic here. It might look like magic, but it's just like, listening to a concert pianist or watching a basketball game. These people have perfected their craft. And they'll even tell you sometimes they failed. Sometimes they just don't do what they wanted to. And they'll tell you how much practice that it takes to get through there. I'm the same way, it takes practice. Lots and lots of practice. But you get good at doing what you want to do if you put enough time into it. You'll come up with techniques, styles of your own. It's good to know what other people are doing, good to know how to do something in certain ways, but then you'll figure it out. You'll bring your own style, your own technique into it. There's that big rock down at the bottom there. I'm not going to put that rock in. It's a little distracting. Kind of takes your eye away from the rest of what's going on in there. I'm just going to kind of leave it out there. Add a few more lines, a few more shapes for your reflected light, reflections into the water. Here's that little bay window that's coming out there. Like I say, there's a ton more that you could add into it. It's up to you what you do to it. These pictures can be found online. This is Scotney Castle. It's not really a castle. Scotney Manor House. We love the oldness to it, the history of it. It's amazing and fun. And really, that's about all the time we have. today. Thank you for coming along and drawing with me. Thank you for supporting me in this journey of life and being willing to do something you've never done before. To do something that maybe you're not comfortable with. Maybe you're afraid of it. And I hope somehow this has made your life a little bit better, because art makes life better. And I hope you have a lovely day.